Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today's video is a little bit different to one that I've done before. It's just going to be a sit down talking video and I'm going to talk through my birth story with my eldest Quinn. I wanted to do this video because I thought it might be a nice memory for Quinn to be able to watch back when he's older, and if it's helpful for any expectant mums as well, then that's an added bonus. So if you're new to my channel, I'd be really grateful if you would consider subscribing and let me know what you think in the comments below and how this compares to your birth experience if you've had one yet. So let's get started. So Quinn was my first child. I had him in 2016. The pregnancy went really smoothly. I felt really happy the whole way through. Had a little bit of nausea to begin with, but after that it was all very smooth. I felt very comfortable the whole way through. Carried on doing everything I normally did. Carried on working out. Carried on horse riding, and yeah, I was really happy the whole way through. He was due on the 8th of September, and I actually went 2 weeks over, and I know a lot of people get uncomfortable, but I was so lucky. I was very happy being pregnant. Really wasn't fussed at all. Yeah, it went on to so he was due on the 8th, went on to the 21st of September when I was induced. So I went in the morning to be induced. It was quite nice to have it sort of planned, so I knew I'd be having a baby one way or the other in the next day or so. I think I was induced at around 11 AM, and then they actually sent me home. They said I'm low risk. They said there's no point just hanging around in the hospital. They said just go home and wait for something to happen. So we came home and we actually ended up going to, it was a really lovely sunny day, so we actually ended up going to the pub around the corner, and we just sat in the pub garden all afternoon. And then we came home. I still wasn't feeling anything at all, so we just carried on as normal, made dinner, made some fajitas, had those, and then I started to think I was maybe feeling a few twinges in the evening, but obviously it never happened to me before. I didn't really know what I was supposed to be feeling. So I think it got to about 10 PM ish, and I said to Tim, you might as well go to bed because it could be a long night, so you might as well try and get a little bit of sleep. So Tim went off to bed, and I stayed up feeling these few twinges, and then my contractions really started. So after my contractions started, they actually got really intense really quickly, and I think that is because I was induced. I think that does happen sometimes when you're induced. So I know other people say there's this gradual build-up with contractions quite far spaced apart and sort of not lasting so long in length. For me, it was instant. The contractions were coming like a minute apart and were super intense and lasting for about a minute. So I tried to sort of breathe through it for as long as I could. I remember just being in our lounge downstairs on a birthing ball, and I stayed like that probably for about an hour and a half, I'd say, and then it got to almost midnight and I thought, I can't do this on my own anymore. So I went and woke Tim up and I said, like, I think I need a bit of help here. So he came out and he got an app on his phone, which is an NHS app, I think, and started recording the contractions for us. And at that point they were getting so intense that I was actually sick. So all of that fajitas that we had came straight back up. And then I think I kept being sick. I think I was just finding it so intense, the pain. It just made me really nauseous. So I kept being sick. So after a while of that, we called the hospital to let them know I was in labour and to see what they suggested. And I was actually even struggling to talk at that point. I was just still trying to breathe through it. But because I kept being sick, I was tired already, I was struggling to talk. The hospital said, look, just come in. So we went to hospital, and I remember it takes us about half an hour to get to hospital. I remember sitting in the car holding on. I think I was holding on to the handle up there and holding on to the handle on the door. And I think it's the only time I've ever said to Tim, get me there fast, drive faster. But he didn't. He drove very safely to hospital. He was very sensible. So we arrived in hospital about 2 AM. And again, I remember getting from the car park to the maternity ward. You have to go up a lift, and it's quite a bit of a walk. And I remember sort of every few steps having to stop, to catch my breath. Thought I was going to be sick. Yes, I remember that walk very well. And then when we got there, they took me straight into a delivery suite and gave me gas and air straight away, which really helped. And then they checked me, and I can't remember how many centimetres I was, but I don't think I was that far along at that stage. So they said, did I want any more pain relief? Because I was in a lot of pain. So they gave me pethidine, and they then sent me off onto one of the wards. And I personally didn't get on very well with the pethidine. I wish I hadn't had that, but obviously I didn't really know how it was going to affect me. But I just felt very spaced out. I didn't really feel in control of anything or aware of anything. Again, I still had the nausea. It made me feel very sick. It did make me feel a bit sleepy, which was quite good because that numbed a bit of the pain. But yeah, I really just overall didn't like the feeling of it. And also, I think this happens, but it really slowed everything down for me. So I had felt the labour was very intense. And as soon as I had the pethidine, everything sort of slowed right down. And again, I kind of wish maybe I hadn't had that because it might have kept the labour going a bit faster. But everything worked out in the end, actually. And I think it can affect the baby's breathing, but it didn't with me. So I ended up on a ward for a little while. And then it got back to the early hours of the morning, I think maybe 6 a.m-ish. A midwife came and checked me and they said I was ready to go back to the delivery suite. Took me back there. Again, I was still being sick and I was still in a lot of pain. So in the end they said to me, do you want to try an epidural? And I was in so much pain that I said, yeah, let's go for that. Let's try that. And I think there's a bit of a short window of opportunity as well to go for the epidural. So they basically said to me, if you want an epidural, you need to go for it now. So we decided to do that, had the epidural, and again, that slowed everything right down again. I could really catch my breath. I felt quite normal again. I could hold a conversation. And I could even sort of, it was the kind of epidural where you can still move your legs a bit. So I could even get up and walk around a bit. So that felt quite nice, keep moving positions. I could go to the toilet. So yeah, we had that. And that was fine for a few hours. Like I say, I was trying to move around a lot to keep things moving along. And at one point I actually got up and started walking around. Tim had fallen asleep on a chair. And I fell over. And then Tim suddenly woke up and dashed over to pick me back up. So I was probably walking around more than I should have done with an epidural. And then it got back to the evening. And I was checked again by a midwife and they told me I could start pushing. So I think this was maybe around 7 or 8 in the evening. So I started pushing. I found it really hard because I'd had the epidural and it had been topped up during the day. I found it really hard to feel when to push. The midwife was helping me and talking me through it. But yeah, I struggled with that. And again, I mean, it's easy to say now, but I kind of think if I hadn't had all of that intervention, I think I would have got him out quicker, perhaps, and I would have known when to push, but I was really struggling with that. So anyway, I started pushing. I think it got to around 8:30-ish, and the midwife said to me, you've got an hour to push, otherwise we're going to have to consider intervention because we need to get the baby out. So I pushed like mad for that hour as hard as I could, and nothing really happened. So after the hour, the midwife got the doctor in to have a look, and they decided that they would use a Kiwi, which I think is the same as a ventouse. It's like a suction to get the baby out. So they basically put the, it's like a plunger, I think, put it on the baby's head, and then use that to suck them out. So when Quinn did come out eventually, he had a bruise like that on the top of his head, but that only lasted a couple of days and went. And because of the Kiwi, I had to have an episiotomy as well, so a little cut, but actually I think that was better because then it meant I didn't tear. So I think for healing it was better, and it was less severe than it possibly could have been if I'd torn. So Quinn was eventually born at 10 p.m. So I'd been in labour for exactly 24 hours. As I say, he was born with using the Kiwi, and immediately after he was born I was sick again. But then I was able to hold him straight away and had him wrapped on me. And I stayed in the delivery suite for about 2 hours while they did the checks on Quinn, checks on me. I had to have a few stitches. And then I was allowed to go back to the ward. And I remember it was really lovely when we did go back onto the maternity ward, because as I came in, even though it was really late at night, all of the staff were saying congratulations and really, really happy. And obviously, I mean, they deal with this day to day. So to still have that enthusiasm and energy to say congratulations and be happy for you as you're walking in the ward, it was just magical. I really, really enjoyed that. And I'm really grateful to the staff there for everything that they did. So there's me thinking that everything is done and dusted and the worst part is over. But I think we probably got back to the ward about 12 p.m, 12:30. Tim actually went home because I said, look, we've been up 24 hours now, you're exhausted, I'm tired, there's not a lot more you can do. So I sent him home and I was there on my own. And then one of the midwives came in during the night, so maybe 2 a.m, and said, we've tried to piece back together the placenta and we think there's some missing. But we'll have a look into it, we'll keep monitoring you, and we'll see where we go from there. Okay, so that was the beginning of it. Then the next day they said, we think there possibly is placenta missing, but you seem quite well in yourself. So what we're going to do is send you home in a few hours time and we'll just see how you are. So in the morning, I actually felt really quite unwell, but I just assumed, never having a baby before, I assumed that's what everybody feels like after having a baby. And the midwife said that I was doing quite well. So they said, despite the retained placenta, I should be allowed to go home, and just that they would keep monitoring me at home. The community midwives would be monitoring me there. So I actually stayed in hospital, that was on the Friday, and I came home on the Saturday morning. So they did keep me in for one extra night. And then on the Saturday I came home, and as I say, I still was not feeling well, but I assumed this was just how everybody feels after having a baby. So I think I got home at sort of mid-afternoon on Saturday by the time I was discharged, figured out the car seat, driven home, all of that. And we had a couple of friends come over to meet Quinn. And again, I wasn't feeling very well, I was just sitting on the sofa. And then as one of my friends started to leave, I said, oh, really don't feel very well. And I remember sitting on the bed thinking, oh, I just feel really uncomfortable, really unwell. So she said, right, I'm just going to go, and left me obviously with Tim. And then as I stood up, I think I noticed a bit of blood on the bed. I thought, oh, what's that? And I went to the toilet and there was quite a lot of blood. And then I started struggling to breathe. I got really short of breath, really shaky. And I said to Tim, look, I don't want to be dramatic. I'm not a dramatic person, but I just don't feel well. And then it escalated very, very quickly after that. So my shortness of breath got far worse. My shaking got far worse. I was absolutely freezing cold, but hot to touch. So I had a huge blanket wrapped around me, and it just didn't feel like enough. So this was probably about 10 p.m. on the Saturday night. So Tim said, I'm just going to take you back to hospital. We'll just take you back to A&E. So he got Quinn in the car seat, and then he got me in the car, and I sat in the back with Quinn to try and keep an eye on him. But by that point, I was really struggling. I felt really a bit confused, really couldn't breathe, I really couldn't talk, and I was shaking, and I had a huge blanket wrapped around me, like I say, but I was freezing cold, but I felt hot. So I sat in the back with Quinn, and I remember Tim trying to talk to me the whole way to hospital, and I just couldn't talk. And I think he was worried that I'd passed out or something in the back. So yeah, he drove me straight back to hospital. We went he parked the car right outside A&E. And I remember him thinking, how am I going to get her and the baby in? Because I couldn't even walk at this point. So I think he ran into A&E to try and get help, but there was no one there. It was late at night. So I think he came out with a wheelchair. And it just sounds like a comedy sketch, but so I remember he got the pushchair out, got Quinn into the pushchair, managed to get me into a wheelchair. I was sort of hunched over in the wheelchair trying to push Quinn, and he was trying to push me. It was like a train going into hospital. It was just ridiculous. And then the people in A&E said, go straight back up to maternity. So, and again, this was a funny part. I remember getting to the lift up to maternity. Tim pushed Quinn in, and then the door started to shut. And I remember just thinking, no, don't send him up in the lift on his own. Fortunately, Tim managed to just get an arm in the door and get us all in the lift. Got us up to maternity. They took me straight back to the delivery suite. And then I had a team of doctors straight on me. I was still freezing cold, still shaking uncontrollably, literally couldn't talk. They started treating me straight away. And it turned out I had sepsis. So I think the retained placenta had caused some sort of infection, and I'd managed to get sepsis. So I then stayed in that delivery suite, I think for a day and a half, maybe even 48 hours in that delivery suite, while I was having antibiotics and the team were working on me. And it was awkward. I was still trying to breastfeed, so I couldn't really sit up, so I had Quinn on the bed, and I was trying to hunch over him on the bed. I remember being really quite scared at that point. So I just thought, I've just had a new baby. I don't want anything to happen to me, so I'm not able to look after the baby. Really quite a scary experience. So once the team had managed to stabilise me there, they sent me back to the maternity ward, and I actually got my own private room. I think because of the sepsis, I think I had to be separated from the general wards. So I had my own room, and I stayed there for 4 days, which actually I was grateful for because I felt so poorly. And I was struggling to look after Quinn, I was struggling to take care of myself. So it was nice being on a ward and having the midwives around there to help me with Quinn and with myself. And I was struggling with breastfeeding because I felt so poorly. I just didn't seem to be producing the milk. So I kept getting very upset about that. And the midwives were fantastic. They were so helpful. And in the end, they were like, if you're struggling, you can just go onto a bottle. So that's why Quinn ended up being bottle fed. So I think I breastfed for the first sort of 3 days, and then he ended up going onto a bottle. So then after 4 days, I was feeling better. And they said I do still have the retained placenta, they suspected, but they couldn't do anything about it because I was too swollen. So they were going to send me home and then again monitor me. So I was sent home after that, feeling much better, carried on with normal new mum bits, looking after the baby. And then so that was in September, and I was expecting to hear back from the midwives or the doctors about the retained placenta. Whenever I saw a community midwife, I mentioned it, but nothing really happened. Got to November and I was still bleeding, so this was 6 weeks later. So I rang the midwife at the doctor's surgery and I said, I'm really concerned, I'm still bleeding, and obviously I've had sepsis, I know I've got retained placenta, nothing's been done about it at this point. And they said, you need to speak to the doctor, you've been discharged. So I rang my GP said, it's not a GP issue, you need to speak to the midwife. So I think I ended up ringing the midwife again in tears, and I said, I feel like I'm not really getting anywhere, I'm stuck between the two. So she said, she can't help me, best thing I could do is go to A&E. So again, I went back to hospital, went to A&E, explained to them what had happened, and they said, you obviously need a scan. So I think they booked me in, and about a day later I went for a scan, and the person scanning me said straight away, I can see it, I can see you've got retained placenta in there, you're going to need some help, we're going to need to remove that. But then I never heard anything from the results again, so never heard back. So I think I ended up ringing up the GP and getting again quite upset on the phone and said, like, I know I've had this scan, they told me I've got retained placenta, still nothing's been done, and this was maybe 2 or 3 weeks on. So again, they booked me in for another scan at the hospital because they said they couldn't find the results from the first one. So I went for another scan at the hospital, and this second scan, they were fantastic. So the lady scanning said, oh, something does look very, very odd in there. And then I immediately got to see a consultant within about half an hour of the scan. They let me see a consultant. The consultant looked at it and she said, there is retained placenta in there, and because it had been in there for quite a while, it had become vascular, so it had its own sort of blood supply and it was being fed with this blood supply, so I think it was growing. So they said, we definitely need to operate to get it out. But they said because it had become vascular and been in there for a while, there was a chance that when they tried to remove it, there could have been excessive blood loss, in which case they would have had to give me a hysterectomy whilst I was in the operating theatre. So I wouldn't have known. So I was obviously really upset about that. I knew I wanted more children. I remember coming out of the consultant room and my sister was there with me. But she hadn't gone into the room, so she didn't hear what happened. I came out and just burst into tears, so she was saying, what's wrong? So yeah, I went home with my sister and they booked me in for the operation, I think about 10 days or so later, and it was, by that point, it was just before Christmas, it was in December. I went and had the operation. I remember feeling very emotional then, because it was general anaesthetic, and I remember at the point they put me under, I did have to sign a form to authorise them to give me a hysterectomy. So I didn't know what they were going to do when I went under. And I remember waking up, again feeling nauseous, 'cause that just seems to be me, I seem to feel nauseous whatever I have, anaesthetic or drug-wise. Wake up feeling very nauseous. The first thing I said was, what did you do? And they said, no, it went very smoothly. They've got the retained placenta out. no hysterectomy. So I was so relieved. But yeah, so the whole process went on. Obviously I had Quinn on the 22nd of September, and I think the operation ended up happening on around the 20th of December. So it had gone on for months. So yeah, it was a bit of a dramatic period after the birth. But the actual birth was not too bad. And I'd say, I know people give lots of horror stories and drama stories. It's really not that bad. And if it was that bad, people wouldn't have more than one child. So yeah, I think I was just quite unlucky. There was a bit of lack of communication afterwards with my retained placenta issues. But yeah, in the long run, everything worked out well. I think the other thing that I found quite difficult is my mum passed away when I was 18, so I didn't have my mum around. And I mean, I know a lot of people have this, but I think it's always hard not having a mum, but it's very hard when you have your first child. That's one of the things you want around. You want your mum there to support you. And I think I found it quite tricky when most of my other friends have got their parents around for that support. So it felt like quite a lonely time because I didn't have that from my mum, and I missed her so much. So yeah, I think I struggled with that as well. And with everything going on, I just wanted I just wanted a hug from my mum basically, and I couldn't have it. But so that's another thing I struggled with, I think, with my first. But yeah, so that's pretty much the whole story. One thing I haven't mentioned is weight. So Quinn was a healthy weight when he was born. He was 7 pounds 11 ounces, even though he was 2 weeks overdue. So that's it for my birth story. Let me know in the comments if you've got similar experiences or completely different experiences, or any experiences with retained placenta as well. I'd be quite interested to hear what people's thoughts are on that and whether anyone else has been through it. And yeah, I might do this again for my second birth story. I thought it was a bit much information to try and amalgamate the two, so I thought maybe I'd do 2 separate videos. And I had quite a different, similar and different experience with Rosie, but I'll get into that on another video. So yeah, I hope you liked the video. If you did, then I'd be really grateful if you could give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to my channel, as I said, I'd be really grateful if you would consider subscribing. And I hope to see you next time. So bye for now.